House will come to order. The first bill on the calendar for the day is House File 740. The clerk will report the bill.
Steve, we're still getting that. Senate File 740. On the calendar for today, an act relating to state lands.
Representative Erickson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, House File 740 is the Omnibus Lands Bill. It's a combination of 12 bills from 9 different representatives. The purpose of the bill is to authorize the sale or exchange of certain tax-forfeited lands. The lands are located in Anoka, Carlton, Cass, Crow, Wing, Freeborn, Hubbard, Itasca, Couchiching, Lake, St. Louis, and Winona counties. The bill authorizes the DNR to sell or exchange parcels which are located in Crow Wing, Dakota, Fillmore, and Lac counties. The bill contains boundary changes for 4 state parks and 1 state forest. The bill also has a technical change to the Landowner's Bill of Rights, and the proceeds of the sale of DNR-acquired lands may be used to pay the expenses incurred by the DNR in selling or exchanging state-owned lands administered by the DR. Finally, it fixed some language issues for the state forest land, which allows schools to pick up land to be used by the schools without monetary consideration, and for purposes of public education, and it also makes it they're unable to sell it also. The DNR is required annually to monitor the lands and report the use to the Commissioner of Revenue. That's basically the bill, and we'll stand for questions.
There is an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Johnson C. moving to amend House File 740 to second engrossment as follows. The amendment is coded 574.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. The purpose of this amendment is to solve a problem that's associated with the Leo Hoffman Center. I'm going to take you to the Regional Treatment Center in just south of St. Peter. And this is a campus that houses 3 basic facilities. One is the Minnesota Security Hospital. The second is the Minnesota Sexual Offender Program. Those are large state-operated facilities. And then the third is a private nonprofit called the Leo Hoffman Center. The Leo Hoffman Center treats adolescent males with problematic sexual behaviors, and they were granted part of the land on the campus about in the early 1990s. They moved from the center part of the campus to the edge of the north edge of the campus, and they received a quitclaim deed to own the land. But the problem with that for the Leo Hoffman Center is that there was a reversion. The state retained right for the land to revert back to the state should it not remain a facility similar to the Leo Hoffman Center. The Leo Hoffman Center has built the buildings on the land themselves, and they've paid cash for those buildings, but now they are looking at possibly expanding and realizing they may need to borrow money to expand. To do that, they chatted with their banker, and their banker said with the reversion clause, they are basically ineligible for a loan. So what the agreement would be with this amendment is to allow that process to proceed they would like the option to purchase the property at its appraised value with the understanding that the reversion clause would be removed. And that's what this amendment does. The amendment thus sets up the process for the sale. The Commissioner of Administration retains the option to add conditions to the sale that protects the state's interest related to the location of the property near the security hospital. I ask for your support on this amendment. Thank you.
Any discussion to the amendment? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. The motion prevails. The amendment is adopted. There is another amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Kelly? Kelly and others moving to amend House File 740 to second engrossment as follows. The amendment is coded A3.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I will present the amendment for Representative Kelly. Members, this amendment allows a sale of 1.36 or 1.38 acres in Goodhue County. It's a portion of the John Murtaugh Wildlife Management Area. Initially, when the Omnibus Lands Bill was heard in Representative Dill's committee, the landowner and the wildlife refuge transferees, the party that transferred the land to them, and the DNR had not had agreement on how they would handle a problem that occurred because of when the land was surveyed, the lines didn't match up to an understood and long adhered to easement on the property. So they do now have agreement. The DNR, the landowner, and the family that transferred the land to the wildlife management area all have agreement. It's represented in this amendment, and I encourage your support. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to give a little bit of background that this is the John Murtaugh Wildlife Management Area is a constituent of mine who unfortunately lost his life in a real tragic traffic accident. He was a big pheasant hunter, and this wildlife management area was established by his family with money they raised and with RIM money. So there's state money involved here, and that's why this amendment's before us. Representative Kelly and I and a number of folks, including Representative Erickson, have worked on this issue, and I just want to make sure that we put it on the record that this is an ongoing discussion still taking place, and we want to make sure that the Murtaugh family is satisfied in the end with the results. It's our understanding that the proceeds from this sale, if it is done, will be reinvested back in the existing wildlife management area. And I do support the amendment and really appreciate Representative Drazkowski, Representative Kelly working on the issue, because it's not real clear. The property owner thought they had an easement, and there's some question, and DNR is trying to work on it. But we do need to take into account the Murtaugh family and their feelings on the issue. So thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I do support the amendment.
Any further discussion? Representative Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members, and thank you, Representative Drazkowski, for offering that in my absence. I just wanted to also say thank you to the DNR, who has taken a lot of time and talked to the individual in question, and also taken into account the Murtaugh family, like Representative McNamara said. So I do appreciate your support.
Seeing no further discussion, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion fails and is adopted. There is another amendment. Yes, Mr. Clerk, to report the amendment.
O'Driscoll and others moving to amend House File 740 to second engrossment as follows. The amendment is coded A2.
Representative McNamara.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. This is Representative O'Driscoll chairs the School Trust Advisory Group that Representative Ward, I, Representative John Benson, and Representative Keel all serve on it, and this is a good thing that we're working on, and this is a land exchange in St. Louis County, and I think it's got broad bipartisan support, Mr. Speaker, and maybe some of the other ones want to speak, but it's a good thing. Thank you.
Representative Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and Representative McNamara is correct, and from the standpoint that, members, this bill, this amendment was in front of our commission, our School Trust Land Commission, and was vetted there, and actually, the new director of the School Public Trust Lands, Aaron Vandevity, or whatever his name is, who is doing a great job in the serving in the school trust land, was instrumental in really researching this out. And this is a good proposal. It's a proposal that the Commission unanimously agreed upon. So, members, I'd encourage you to vote green on this amendment.
Representative Anzels.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Will the author yield for a question or two? Representative McNamara.
He will yield. Representative Anzels.
Representative McNamara, I know this bog very, very well. It's located about 25 miles south of the iron ore formation. Can you tell the body who the parties are who will be involved in the exchange?
Representative McNamara.
Representative Van Zelk, I cannot.
Representative Anzel.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'd like a roll call on this amendment, please.
Roll call being requested. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call.
Thank you. Members, not being a party to any of this discussion and not knowing who the parties are that will be involved in the exchange, and not knowing anything at all about ownership history, market value evaluations, property tax implications, and so on, I think that this amendment, in order to get this member's support at least, would require a little more explanation and information. So at this time, members, I'm going to urge the body to vote no on this amendment.
Representative Benson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I also serve on this commission, and we had a thorough discussion of the issues, and I remember asking Aaron Vanderlund whether or not there were any mineral resources on this particular plot of land, and he said no, there was not. And by the way, all school trust lands, whether they've been sold or not, all retain mineral rights. Every square acre and mile of school trust lands that ever existed, and to this day, they retain the mineral rights. So that's really not an issue. Concerning who is interested in purchase this or not, I wish Representative O'Driscoll was here. He does have the answer, I believe. I just don't remember personally on that question, but we should remember that the Attorney General and the School Trust Lands Commission, of which I'm a member, also have to review any sales of this land. And I can assure you that the members of the Commission, including myself, would not be voting to allow a sale to some organization which was going to somehow harm this land, because it's a major aviary, birding area, and that has to remain, and it will remain in a pristine condition. The problem is that the land does not generate hardly any money, never has, for the school trust lands, and this exchange then would be an even exchange for lands that would produce funding. So we're going from about 4 or 5 cents an acre, 15 cents an acre, to about $15 an acre going to the school trust lands. And it, as I said before, it's been thoroughly vetted. We spent a lot of time on this in the commission, and this is a bipartisan commission who are dedicated to children and the trust fund, and also dedicated to environmental protection. I think my voting record on environmental issues can match anybody here in this chamber, and I will not be voting for something that would be a rip-off of the land or the natural resources for some quick gain. The law that was passed, the Driscoll law that was passed at last session, made it very clear that environmental protection was an important and essential part of all deliberations having to do with school trust lands. So I want to assure the membership this is not some quick fix operation, and it's certainly constitutional. And again, our commission that you appointed and that we serve on voluntarily will be very careful to protect not only the interests, the financial interests of the children of the state of Minnesota, but also environmental integrity as well. So thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Wagenius.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will Representative McNamara yield, please?
Representative O'Driscoll is here now. Representative Wagenius.
Oh, then I would prefer it if Representative O'Driscoll would yield.
Representative O'Driscoll will yield.
Thank you. Representative O'Driscoll, this is 11,000 acres, and it is going to be exchanged. What is the value of the land you expect to get? Give me a range.
Representative O'Driscoll.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and Representative Wagenius. A little bit more in the way of background, which I think will help you with that question, maybe a few other questions that you have relative to the amendment. The property that's in question is in what we call the Sax-Zims Bird Preserve up in St. Louis County. And in the heart of that preserve, there are some school trust lands. And it's currently intact with the other state-owned lands. What the Department of Natural Resources has done is identified this 11,000 acres. What they're looking to do is to work with a third party to do a land swap. The third party will take title to the property that's in question. That will be swapped out. What will happen then once they become the fee owner of that property, an exchange will be done with the school trust lands to exchange that property into their hands, and they will then turn it over to the DNR or hold it as a private organization, nonprofit, the Conservation Fund. And as far as the value is concerned, what will happen is we'll have a like value for a value exchange, which is in accordance with the Minnesota Constitution. So even though there's 11,000 acres that's going to be preserved, we may not get 11,000 acres of land, but we will get dollar for dollar value. What's that dollar for dollar value going to be? I don't know. The Department of Natural Resources can't tell us because we need this legislation to be able to allow them the ability to be able to go forward and conduct that research.
Representative Wagenius.
Well, thank you, Representative O'Driscoll. We're not getting at the point here. I'm trying to find out how much value is going to be switched here. So you're getting forest land, and that's the intention. Is that $1,000 an acre, giving you $110,000? Is that roughly what you would expect to get and then sell timber off of that for putting into the school trust land? Am I getting the numbers about right?
Representative O'Driscoll.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and Representative Wagenius. What we will do, in putting it into technical terms, is we are going to have a fee appraisal done to determine the market value of that property, which we do not know today, and identify like property to do a switch where there will be an appraisal on that property to determine how much is going to be purchased, so there will be an equal like exchange for like exchange, so there will be no cost to the state of Minnesota one way or the other than administrative costs for the acquisition exchange of these properties.
Representative Wagenius.
Well, thank you, members. The reason I'm asking these questions is because the intention, the land right now is a peat bog that's been drained, and the intention is to sell it to a private party, or a private party will acquire this, restore the wetlands, which is environmentally sound if it's done right, and then sell the wetlands credits to mining companies. The value of wetlands credits to mining companies is enormous. So my question is, why doesn't the state retain these lands? The school trust folks retain these lands, and restore them, and put the credits into the school trust. Far more money than you would ever get from selling timber off of not very many, 11,000 acres. It's not even going to be 11,000 acres, maybe 5,000 acres. So it doesn't make financial sense to me. And one of the reasons that this should not be done on the House floor is because we are not looking into the finances. Nobody has asked these financial questions. This was an amendment waiting to come to the floor rather than to going through the appropriate committees that would ask the hard questions. So we're asking the hard questions on the floor, and we're getting soft answers. I think the school trust is not well served at this point, and I would urge members to vote no.
Representative Erickson. Okay. Representative Laine.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And will Representative O'Driscoll yield for a question?
He will. Representative Laine.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative O'Driscoll, I was just wondering if you could shed some light on whether or not this had been introduced as a separate bill, and maybe if you were the author, who the author was, and if it did get a hearing.
Representative O'Driscoll.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Laine, I'm glad you asked that question, and my apologies. I was actually working on another bipartisan effort here that delayed me from the floor, like this commission has been. And to your question about was this bipartisan, how was it introduced? It is a bill that I was asked by the Land Trust Commission to carry on the House side, that all but one member, because he wanted to learn some more information about it, had signed off on it. We had 2 hearings with this in front of the Land Trust Commission, and we then recommended that we would put it into the process. And I went to the chair of the Environment Policy Committee, and he suggested to me that since we had 2 hearings on 2 different occasions that were publicized, and we took public input, and we weren't satisfied with the input that we had received and the information we had in the first meeting, so I held it over and opened it up again for another hour's worth of discussion at the following commission meeting. And he said, you know, that makes good sense. You've had some public input on it. You didn't do it once, you did it twice. And he said that the committee wasn't going to be meeting, and he suggested to me any member can bring forward an amendment on the floor if you are interested in doing that, just as we've seen in any of the other bills thus far and any of the other bills that we may be seeing coming forward this session. As a result of that, I went ahead and I brought the amendment forward. And you'll notice today as well you have a letter on your desk from the Department of Natural Resources, from the Commissioner endorsing this, from the author of this bill, and from the chair of the committee endorsing this exchange. And so it actually probably is a little bit better than some of the amendments that we've seen on the floor that people have raised the question. Has this gone through committee? Have we had a vetting on this? I would submit to you that process has been followed, and we also had an opportunity to vet this out in a public forum, but not once, but on 2 separate occasions in front of the Land Trust Commission, which again, for the reference of people, is a bicameral body that consists of 6 members from the House, 6 members from the Senate, as well as evenly represented by the 2 major caucuses. And in a nonpartisan way, we've moved this forward, or bipartisan, however you want to look at it.
Representative Laine.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and Representative O'Driscoll and members. You know, I guess this amendment just makes me a little nervous. The Sax-Sim Bog is located in about half in my legislative district and half in Representatives Metza's legislative district. So, you know, we were never asked to sign on to the bill or onto the amendment. I didn't know that there was hearings on the possible land exchange of 11,000 acres in our legislative districts. And so to be on the House floor now when there's an amendment in front of us dealing with just our legislative districts when nobody's ever discussed this with us before, it just makes me a little nervous. I feel like I don't know enough about this. We're talking about a lot of land in our districts. And that land does have a lot of value to the people living in the small communities around the bog. So members, I think at this time, I just don't think this is ready for prime time, and I would have to ask members to vote no at this time. Again, this is our legislative districts, and we hadn't been approached on this issue before. Thank you.
Members, I'd like to recognize former Representative Andy Dawkins, who has joined us on the House floor today. Representative Swatsky. Okay. Representative O'Driscoll.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would Representative Laine yield to a question, please? Actually, before that, I'd like to go to Representative Metsa, if I could.
Representative Metsa will yield. Representative O'Driscoll.
Thank you. Representative Metsa, did you at any time during this process receive a visit from members of the Department of Natural Resources to visit with you about this particular project?
Representative Metsa.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. Representative O'Driscoll, not to my recollection. I know we've met with the DNR, being from mining country, quite a few times on a number of different issues. I did meet with the folks who do run the bird sanctuary, though, this year out at the Zimbog. So it wasn't on their list of items to discuss, but I'm sure that they were the users of the facility, not the people we're talking about here.
Representative O'Driscoll.
Representative Laine, would you yield to a question, please? Representative Laine, I'd like to ask you the same question. Were you visited by members of the Department of Natural Resources relative to this?
Representative Laine will yield. Representative Laine.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and Representative O'Driscoll. Someone came to my office to talk to me about the Sax-Zim bog. I honestly can't say if I remember whether or not it was the DNR or another organization. There's a community action group I speak to quite frequently on the Sax-Zim bog. It's like the Friends of the Sax-Zim bog, because they have this festival in that area. And some of the local small towns are involved, including Floodwood, which is in my district, and Meadowlands, which was in my district and is now in Representative Metsa's district. So whatever materials were left in my office, I actually mailed to the mayor of Floodwood and asked for feedback and to see if it was something that this community action group would be supportive of. I have not had a chance to touch base with them to see if it is something that they were supportive of. And, to answer your question more specifically, I don't remember if it was the DNR that talked to me or not, but I know that I was never made aware of a hearing. I was never asked to sign on to a bill. And when I sent the information to the members of my community who live around the Sax-Zim bog, it was the first they heard of it, and they haven't had a chance to get back to me yet.
Representative O'Driscoll.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, I appreciate hearing from Representatives Metsa and Laine, and they're both telling you that they've heard from people. It was at my direction as the chair of the Land Trust Commission that we would not move forward on this until Representatives Metsa and Laine had been contacted, made aware of what was going on, and provided the opportunity to provide us feedback. Hearing nothing from Representatives Metsa and Laine, and hearing back from the DNR that those conversations went well, my assumption was that they were in the loop on what was happening and were not in opposition. I've spoken to both Representative Metsa and Laine a number of times throughout the session. Neither one of them have raised that question with me until today on the House floor. The other thing I guess I would like to share with the group today is that, remember, what we're doing is we're holding in place a very important resource, the Sax-Zim property. By allowing that property to be changed in ownership, that island of property inside that preserve that's owned by the kids here in the state of Minnesota, to do two good things. One, to preserve that, and number two, to be able to maximize the returns, if possible, on student trust lands, which is a charge that this legislature gave to the Department of Natural Resources. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Dill.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. To the point about the value and what we will get, it is not possible to know what we will get in exchange for the lands that are being proposed to be traded until such time that there is an appraisal. And when there is an appraisal and the value is determined of the lands that the school trust owns, then the proposer will have to go find lands that are of equal value and acceptable to the DNR for the trade. It's not going to be something that is unacceptable to the DNR. And it could be, since we don't know the values, it could be 11,000 acres of this bog, and it could be 50,000 acres of forested lands, or it could be reversed. We do not know until such time as there has been an appraisal on the lands that are within the school trusts that are being proposed. And that is exactly what this is. When we authorize this today, if we do, it does not mean that this will happen, because all of these exchanges are always fraught with difficulties. Just because we authorize it today does not mean that it will ever happen. It allows them to go forward with the process. Next, Representative Wagenius mentioned that we should consider having the DNR do the wetlands credits and sell the wetlands credit, and they would be far more valuable. Representative Wagenius, I agree with you. But the DNR has not even demonstrated that they can manage the school trust lands now, let alone take the next step to try and create wetlands credits and then sell them on the open market, because they're not a retail organization that would do something like that. Lastly, I want to mention to each and every person on this House floor that the O'Driscoll Amendment follows exactly to the wording of the state constitution with regards to trust land. And lastly, regarding the process and how the amendment got here, I just want to confirm that what Representative O'Driscoll told this body is exactly what happened with regards to the process that he mentioned prior to getting to me as the committee chair, the fact that we were no longer planning hearings in our committee and that there were a lot of people clamoring for hearings, and I decided not to have any more, and I suggested that he bring this to the House floor as an amendment. So thank you for listening.
Representative Simonson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I just want to make a couple of comments as a representative from St. Louis County, one of the several. I think we're getting a sense here that quite possibly this amendment is potentially at least a significant policy shift, if you will. And there are certainly a number of questions that I have that haven't been answered, but in all fairness, I've only seen this for a couple of hours. I'm going to stand up with my friends from the Iron Range and ask you to vote no on this bill, with the full understanding that what's in front of us, may very well be the best idea. But I have questions, I have groups, and I have individuals within my district that are going to want to know some answers before we vote yes on this particular amendment. So I think that it's large enough of a substance issue where it belongs in front of a committee where it can be properly vetted, and for those that are interested can have the opportunity to come forward and ask their questions or provide testimony. So with that, members, I would encourage also a no vote.
Representative Anzels.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I apologize for getting up twice, and thank you, Representative Dill, for your clarity on this matter. But I do think a little additional clarity is necessary for this member to feel good about this, and that is Representative O'Driscoll or any of the participants in this amendment, can you give us the name of the private nonprofit that is involved in this exchange, and or can you give us the names of any private citizens who are involved in this exchange? Those answers are pretty important to me. And lastly, please be aware that these land use issues in northern Minnesota are becoming more and more and more sensitive to us as elected officials because of the implications on our already very, very poor property tax base. So can you answer those questions, Representative O'Driscoll, and will you yield?
He will yield. Representative O'Driscoll.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Anzels, I heard 3 questions, and I will attempt to answer those. If there were more that were in there, please, by all means, re-ask those questions. I was just visiting with some other members who had some questions here at the time. The first question is, can I tell you the names of who the party is that's looking at that? It's, as I mentioned earlier, it's the Conservation Fund that is looking at doing this. Secondly, I am not aware of any other private businesses or other industries that are providing financing for this. And thirdly, I am not aware of any, nor have I been contacted by any individuals who are looking for or against this. It's been primarily conversation with the Department of Natural Resources. We did offer public testimony twice at the Land Trust Commission, and we had heard none. And I was very, very conscious about making sure that we did that because I want transparency in this process.
Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And members, I've passed out two maps that I received not from the Department of Natural Resources, but from the Conservation Fund. And one is to give the first map shows northeastern Minnesota, and it has a dot and a description of where the Sax-Zim bog is. The second is a map that shows areas highlighted with different colors. It's different shades on your black and white version. And then it has two small insets of the map. I think Representative Anzel's, and it's hard to read, I have to put my glasses on, there is something called current EIP Minnesota properties. So there is another entity involved beyond the Conservation Fund. And I'm concerned a little bit about the process here, because I appreciate Representative O'Driscoll hearing this or bringing this and having the discussion in the School Trust Advisory Committee. But I'm concerned when Representative Metza and Representative Laine, whose district this is, their name is not on the amendment, and it appears that they may not have been in the loop on it. And we're dealing with 11,000 acres. This is one of those issues where it may be a good outcome if we approve this. When we look at the amendment on face value, it looks like just another exchange. But I think it is a precedent-setting exchange. And we've set some precedent in the past, particularly on tax implications. Maybe, Mr. Speaker, if the tax chair would yield.
Yes, she will yield. Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Linczewski, I think in the tax committee and in the tax bill we've passed, there have been some questions about consequences for eased property and what the implications are for the local units of government. Have we had any discussion about tax implications on exchanges like this particular one, or have you seen anything like this in the tax committee before?
Representative Linczewski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Hansen, we have been discussing this in the Tax Conference Committee just in the last few days. The Senate has brought forward some provisions that the House didn't carry, and we're learning about them now, and they're raising the issue of when conservation easements are negotiated, then the remaining parcel pays less in property tax, and therefore those property tax burdens are shifted onto the remaining parcels. And so those legislators who represent areas with large amounts of conservation easements are coming to the legislature and asking for some redress, and we're having conversations about how we might do that, understanding, of course, that assessors don't like valuation that's confusing. So there are a lot of property tax issues and assessment issues and valuation issues on these sorts of issues before the Tax Conference Committee right now this year.
Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And would Representative Dill yield?
He will yield. Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Dill, do you know in the exchange bill in the Senate if this provision is being carried in the Senate language?
Representative Dill.
Representative Hansen, I believe it is.
Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Wagenius, would you yield for a question?
She will yield. Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Wagenius, have you heard this bill, or are there any budget considerations that would be, from what you can tell on face value, of this exchange?
Representative Wagenius.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Hansen, I was standing to address part of the issue that you brought up. Representative Dill mentioned that this is not something that sales are not something that DNR handles of wetland credits, but they're certainly adept at handling timber sales. And so I think they could certainly do these sales if the value was such that it would provide more money for the trust fund if those lands were, the credits were sold. But I would also like to take the opportunity to tell members that the Conservation Fund did visit me, and it is my understanding that it was their intention only to be an intermediary, and they were going to sell it to the wetlands to a for-profit company, which would redo the wetlands to sell them for credits. So obviously there is some value here that needs to be established, and the appropriate place to do that, I believe, is in a finance committee.
Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And members, I think this is a good example of a bill that may seem very straightforward on its face, but has a lot of questions that come up. And Representative Dill, if it is being heard in the Senate or it's being carried in the Senate bill, there will be an opportunity for further discussion. I would encourage Representative O'Driscoll to withdraw the amendment because it's not ready for prime time.
Representative Dill.
Well, thank you. And I'm not encouraging people to vote for or against it. It's been a pretty good debate. But I have to say, I have never, in 11 years of serving on the Environment Finance Committee, ever heard the Environment Finance Committee set a value on a piece of school trust land. That is solely a part of the appraisal process. Once it has been determined what the land is, where it is located, what its best use is, highest and best use, that is how a value is determined. Not in the Minnesota legislature, not in any committee, the Tax Committee, the Environment Finance Committee, none of the other. And lastly, as I think about that seat right over there where Representative Metz is sitting, and I think about that jumping jack that would be jumping up in the air right now, yelling and screaming at the top of his lungs about giving the authority to DNR to do more work with the school trust lands when they have over-certified, overcharged, done everything they possibly can to keep the agency afloat at the cost of the school trust, and we've heard thousands of hours of controversy over this. Don't vote for it, vote for it. It's fine with me, but at least we've got it out on the table. Thank you.
Representative Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I too apologize for rising a second time, members, but just to be clear, the new administrator of the School Public Trust Land Council Commission, has taken his time to make sure that this is properly researched and a good product and a good project. And he is not a puppet for the DNR, period. If you have served on the commission, you've seen that. And I think everybody on the commission would agree to that he is there for the school trust and the kids in the state of Minnesota solely, not for the DNR. And another thing I just want to comment on is, wetland mitigation up in that area is going to be needed in the future, maybe up to 20,000 acres of it. And so, we can do something right now to have some wetland areas up there rather than pushing it into other parts of the state. And then, members, this is just to allow this project to move forward, to let the discussion continue, and because it has to come back to the Public Trust Commission for final approval. And I will guarantee you that there's nobody that sits on the Public School Trust Commission that, if they don't think this is proper, is going to vote for it. So this is to allow the process to move forward, to look at a good potential project here for our school children in the state of Minnesota. So again, Representative Dill didn't ask you to vote no or vote yes. I'm going to ask you to vote yes. I think it's a good project and has been vetted greatly, and I think it should move forward. Thank you, members.
Representative O'Driscoll.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. At this point, I'd like to just respond to a couple things that were on the floor. If there aren't any other questions, we could move to a vote on this. The first thing is that this is permissive language. This does not constitute giving complete authority to the department to be able to go forward and to negotiate this. Representatives Laine and Metz and I have visited, and I will make this promise to them and to everybody on this House floor that I will continue to make sure that the members of the DNR get with them and Representative Anzals and others on this. We still have some time before this will go to conference committee. If there are some issues that we have, we can certainly ask for the House and the Senate to consider those modifications in the conference committee. But the urgency on this is the enabling legislation last year said The DNR has 5 years to be able to prioritize the lands that are there and the best use of those lands. This is them doing their due diligence and according to the laws that we passed. And they're asking us to look at this and to preserve the bird sanctuary in the area, in the Zimbogs area, as well as being able to identify some property that could be used in this as well to help with the mission of making school trust lands profitable when it is both economically and environmentally sound to do. Members, I would ask you to vote yes on this. This commission is made up of us being equal parts Democrats, equal parts Republicans, equal parts House, equal parts Senate. And as we continue with this process, we will see more of these kinds of things. And I think we've learned some things here today, but in good faith, I ask you to move forward, knowing that the public policy wonk that I am, I will not let this go if I don't feel comfortable with it, nor will the commission members let this go forward either. I encourage a green vote. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Representative Laine.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And will Representative O'Driscoll yield for a question?
He will yield. Representative Laine.
Mr. Speaker, and Representative O'Driscoll, are you aware if this language was adopted in the Senate Lands Bill or not? I just haven't had time to look at it.
Representative O'Driscoll.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Again, a little background on how the Senate handled this. They did the same model that we did. The Vice Chair authored it in the Senate because that's who the Vice Chair is as a Senator this year, had members look at it, sign on, and it has been included in their lands bill about a week and a half ago as well.
Representative Laine.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and Representative O'Driscoll and members. Just again, I mean, I think in good conscience, I can't vote for this right now. It's not because I'm necessarily opposed to it, but I just simply don't know enough about it, and it does make me nervous that it is, impacting a large area of land in my district, and I just simply don't know enough about it. If it was adopted in the Senate, then maybe it's something that we can pick up in conference committee. But at this time, I can't in good conscience vote for it, and I would ask other members to please vote against it as well. Thank you.
Further discussion to the amendment. Representative Erickson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. This bill was brought for me to carry. I'm trusting that the Democrats on the school trust land adequately went through this. I'll trust Representative O'Driscoll to carry through with what he has or said he was going to do in the conference committee, and so I would encourage a yes vote.
Further discussion to the amendment. Further discussion. Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the amendment.
Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker, I do not believe there was a roll call on this. Was there? Sorry.
Mr. Speaker, there was.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 78 ayes and 53 nays, the motion prevails and the amendment is adopted. There are no further amendments at the desk. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, House File 740 as amended.
Third reading. Discussion to the bill. Further discussion to the bill. Representative Erickson, S.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would Representative Erickson R. yield to a question.
He will yield. Representative Erickson, S.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Erickson, would you explain to the body sections 4 and 5 that deal with the school forest land, the land that can be conveyed to a school district. What my interest is so the land is given to the school district, then what if after some time the school district would sell that land? Would you comment on what is in the new provision? I think maybe we're reinstating some old law, but no, it looks like it's all new language. Would you explain that to the body, please?
Representative Erickson, R.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Erickson has a good ring to it, doesn't it? The school forest land, basically does it's three things. It allows the school to acquire land without any cost to them. That's a change from the law that was changed a couple of years ago. It actually is reverting back to old land, and also that they have to use it. If they don't use it for 3 years, it reverts back to the DNR. If they ever find that they're not wanting to use it, it does not allow them to sell it. It does go back to the DNR.
Further discussion? Further discussion? Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the bill. The clerk will close the roll. There being 113 ayes and 17 nays, the bill is passed as amended and its title agreed to. The next item on the calendar for the day is House File 542. Clerk will report the bill.
House File 542 on the calendar for today, the first engrossment, an act relating to state government.
To the author of the bill, Representative Loeffler.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. House File 42 has to do with our access to quality information to help us do our job. It makes it clear that classified state employees, these are the ones that are hired based on their education, their experience, and their expertise, are to be information resources to legislators in their work. It provides that they can consult with their direct supervisor about that and that our questions should relate to their ongoing duties. And it provides that they should, if they provide information that they believe to be factual to us, or to the legislative auditor or another constitutional officer, that they can't be disciplined for that. And I appreciate the support of Representative Cornish, a retired state employee, in supporting the bill and his offering to help me in responding to any questions or concerns.
There are no amendments at the desk, so the clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, House File 542.
Third reading. Further discussion to the bill? Any further discussion? Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the bill. The clerk will close the roll. There being 79 ayes and 52 nays, the bill is passed and its title agreed to. The next item on the calendar for today is House File 80. The clerk will report the bill.
House File 80, the first engrossment, an act relating to judgments.
To the author of the bill, the member from Hennepin, Representative Hilstrom.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Members, this bill relates to debt buyers. So not someone who originates the debt, but when a secondary party buys debt from some business, so from a credit card company or from a mortgage company, they purchase the debt and then they want to go out and collect that debt. This lays out the process by which they can get a default judgment in court. Members, one of the things that we want to make sure in this state is that the person who is seeking that default judgment actually really owns the debt, that they have the right person, they really have the person who really owes the debt, and that they have the accurate amount of debt that is owed. That's what this does. It says that in order to get a default judgment in court, you have to produce that information to the court, and you have to prove that you've served the party. Mr. Speaker, I do have an amendment at the desk that's a technical change.
There is an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Hilstrom moving to amend House File 80, the first engrossment as follows. The amendment is coded A2.
To the amendment, Representative Hilstrom.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this really is a technical amendment. We've included debt that goes through conciliation court in this process, and one of the things that that's required is proof that you gave notice to the person you're seeking a default judgment on. Well, when you go to conciliation court, the court is the one that actually sends out the notice, so we just need them to prove that they gave a correct address. That's it, Mr. Speaker, and I'd ask members to vote yes on the amendment.
Discussion to the amendment. Discussion to the amendment. Seeing no further discussion, all in favor of the Hilstrom amendment signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed say no. The motion prevails and the amendment is adopted. There are no further amendments at the desk. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, House File 80 as amended.
Third reading. Discussion to the bill. Any further discussion to the bill? Representative Pepin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the author yield to a question?
She will yield. Representative Pepin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and Representative Hilstrom. I think your bill has got good intent. I just have a question on line 1.14 and 1.15. It talks about admissible evidence, and I'm wondering how that works. Who would normally decide whether evidence is admissible, and how does that work in this process?
Representative Hilstrom.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thanks for asking that question. One of the things that happens is the court actually is the one that determines what that would be. One of the things that has been a point of discussion is whether or not if the party just says, yes, I owe it, whether or not in an affidavit that's enough. And we want to make it really clear that no, that's not just enough. Just because you say, I am the owner of this debt, you actually have to produce information proving that you are. And so that's what that language means.
Representative Pepin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Hilstrom, I understand that that's what you're trying to get at, but my understanding of the rules of evidence is that those words are terms of art, and only the judge can decide it, so I'm not sure that this will have the legal effect that you want, and I'm wondering if you could maybe in conference look at seeing if there's some better terminology. I like what you're doing, I just don't know that the words are accurate.
Representative Hilstrom.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and Representative Pepin. That has been part of the discussion that's been going on, and ultimately what happens is a judge signs off on this, whether or not there is enough information. It doesn't necessarily require a hearing, but ultimately someone signs the document, and so ultimately that will be reviewed. We will be going to conference. The Senate bill is different. It has two other provisions as well. I feel pretty strongly that we actually have the right language here, but thank you for the question.
Representative Hertaus.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would Representative Hilstrom yield for a question?
She will. Representative
Hertaus. Representative Hilstrom, in Minnesota law, an oral contract is still a contract, and although oftentimes it's referred to as being worth the paper it's written on, How does this bill address that issue in terms of having an oral contract between two parties and be able to enforce that debt?
Representative Hilstrom.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you for the question. This doesn't affect any person-to-person debt. This is only when the person who actually loaned you the money then sells the debt to someone else, and that person who bought the debt is trying to collect. And so ultimately, if you and I make an agreement and it's oral, no one's going to buy that debt from me.
Representative Hertaus.
Thank you. Would Representative Hilstrom yield for another question?
She will yield. Representative Hertaus.
I'm trying to think of those scenarios in which an oral contract is entered into, maybe work is performed, and a judgment is sought for that, of which you're unable to collect the debt even though you have a judgment. You still don't have a contract, and you're willing to sell it in the secondary market. So answer that for me, please.
Representative Hilstrom.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If you are purchasing debt as a debt buyer and you want to be able to use the court system to get a default judgment, that means you don't go to court, you don't have a hearing, you are seeking a default judgment. You would have to have the evidence that's required in this bill in order to seek that.
Representative Hertaus.
Yield for one more question.
She will yield. Representative Hertaus.
So what you're saying, this bill does not affect the circumstance in which a creditor who performed work obtains a judgment even though it was an oral contract.
Representative Hilstrom.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As long as that debt hasn't been purchased by someone else and it's that secondary party who's attempting to collect the debt through a default judgment in court, it does not have an effect on it.
Further discussion to the bill? Further discussion? Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the bill. Clerk will close the roll. There being 131 ayes and 0 nays, the bill is passed and it's as amended and its title agreed to. The next item on the calendar for the day is Senate File 748. The clerk will report the bill.
Senate File 748, the first engrossment, an act relating to commerce.
To the author of the bill, Representative Laine.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, members, if you wanted to prepay for funeral expenses, one option would be pre-need funeral insurance. It's one option, but not in Minnesota. We have a statute that limits the sale of policies that have what's called a graded death benefit. A graded death benefit is one in which the benefits paid out in the first 2 to 3 years of the policy are less than the face value of the policy. In the case of pre-need funeral insurance, just over the premium already paid. Pre-need funeral insurers don't want to just be covering people who will likely die in the first couple years of the policy, so they need to limit the payout in those first years. This bill exempts pre-need funeral insurance from this state statute. With this exemption, pre-need funeral insurance could be sold in Minnesota, and we are the last state in the nation to allow this. That's the bill. No controversy in committee, and I ask for your support.
Further discussion to the bill? Further discussion? Seeing no amendments, the bill will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, Senate File 748.
Third reading. Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the bill. Clerk will close the roll. There being 131 ayes and 0 nays, the bill is passed and its title agreed to.
Mr. Speaker.
Representative Purcell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that we recess at the call of the chair approximately an hour.
Representative Purcell moves to recess at the call of the chair for approximately 1 hour. Representative Garofalo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would Representative Purcell yield for a question?
He will yield. Representative Garofalo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Purcell, would this be 1 hour like the previous 1 hour recess, or really 1 hour this time?
Representative Purcell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Gavel, we're going to shoot for 62 minutes.
Further discussion? All in favor of the motion? Representative Dowd.
Thank you. GOP members will caucus in our caucus room immediately following the recess.
All in favor of the Purcell motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. No. Motion prevails.